when we go in to sell a solution, whether it's just a simple project like installing something, like upgrading something, let's just say, or if it's a managed services engagement that's going to go on for a year, we're trying to find ways to show them an ROI for that upfront before they buy. You're going to spend, $300,000 with us, but you're going to get $500,000 worth of stuff over the period of whatever. And here's how. You're not going to have to hire another engineer. We're going to save you. You guys are mismanaging all these engineering licenses over here. We're going to cut your bill there by 25%. If you can show it to them in a number, that's nirvana, right?
Hey guys, Damien Stevens, host of MSP Mindset, founder and CEO of Servosity. Today I continue my mission to interview 100 of the fastest growing and most interesting MSPs on the planet. Today I got the blessing of interviewing Chris McHale, where she talks about how she created what she calls a business unit niche, where she can focus on a single business unit, land co-managed deals at mid-market with basically no competition and experience tremendous growth. If you'd like to learn how she's able to define such an interesting niche that drives every partnership as well as their team and their culture and their growth, don't miss out on my conversation with Chris today. So Chris, I think you have a really interesting story, but let's go back a little bit to the beginning. How did you start SPK Associates?
Okay, so let's see. I was working for a small company that was an offshoot of HP, Hewlett-Packard, and they sold mechanical engineering software. That was actually HP's old mechanical engineering software. So that's how I kind of got introduced into the world of engineering and product development, was because I was working with all of these people who were engineers. I was doing systems and networking consulting for this company. Then they said, at some point a couple of years later, they said, well, we don't want to do the system stuff anymore. We just want to focus on the application stuff. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll try to just hang out my own shingle. I didn't have any big ideas about like some big company. I just thought, well, it'd be fun to maybe do some solo consulting. And I liked the clients I'd been working with through this other company. So I asked them, and then I approached the clients, and one of them said, sure, we'd be willing to do this with you solo. So that's how it started. So I started already kind of in this area of doing systems and networking consulting for engineers, for R&D departments, which interestingly at that time, they were the guys that had the networks, because they had these Unix workstations and they had to have networks. And the rest of the company was still doing peer-to-peer, Microsoft stuff, and barely even had an internet connection. Meanwhile, engineering's, kind of all in. So I started doing that. And then after a few years of that, I thought, well, this is kind of fun, but I'm getting a little bored with just doing technical stuff. And I love business. So let me see if I can grow this thing. And so I started to try to grow it. And that's kind of how we started. That was part of it. The other part was being in Silicon Valley. Being a technical woman in Silicon Valley at the time was kind of rough. And I also didn't really like the cultures of a lot of the companies that were tech companies here. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to start a company where it was technical and it was definitely, successful and obviously profit oriented, but could create a culture that was supportive of the technical people working, not just trying to build a company off the backs of people, but build something that was really collaborative, where they could enjoy, where they knew they were valued, and, where there was diversity. I was really interested in giving other women, technical women, a seat too. And so was able to do that. And then over the years, all those people have stayed, honestly. And I think we're about 50-50 women, men now, which is kind of cool too. Yeah, it's cool. Got a lot of technical women that work for us that are really good.
That's almost unheard of in this industry.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how I started, and that's kind of the way it went.
So what sort of challenges did you face as a woman in the Valley?
I have this funny story, which was just kind of indicative of what would happen. So I went by Chris from the time I was a kid. So that I didn't just start doing that, but I discovered with the world of email, where you're interacting with people via email, that being called Chris was actually kind of an advantage, because then they didn't really, honestly, they assumed I was a guy, right? And no questions were asked. But there was this funny thing that would happen if I put in a call back in the day when we were managing hardware, right? And I put in a call to, IBM or HP or whatever, and they would send somebody out with a part, and they would be sitting at the client, they would be sitting in the lobby, and I would walk out and they would raise their head and look, and then they would go back down to whatever they were doing because they saw that I was a woman. So I couldn't possibly be the person that had been interacting with them who was going to do a technical thing with them. And then I would walk over and they would raise their heads and I'd say, "Hi, I'm Chris." And they would do this. They would try not to, but they would do this sort of double take, Then they would blank their face and then they would be all, "Oh, okay, great," And then off we would go to do whatever it was. I would say that besides that funny story, there were a lot of situations where, I was only a woman in the room and I would have to earn technical respect. I'd say California by and large, it's a pretty open state, but just technically speaking, I think the assumption was you can't probably be that technical. It just is what it was. I don't think it's really that way anymore. I think it's improved a lot. But that's the way it was. So yeah, I had to kind of earn respect without being grandiose about anything, showing people that I did know what I was talking about. And sometimes that took a few days, sometimes it took a few weeks. But eventually, once they realized that I could pull my technical weight, it was okay. It was fine.
Hey guys, Damien here. As I continue to interview the top MSPs in the world, one thing has become incredibly clear. It's time that we let go. Even more than that, every time I focus on my zone of genius and get out of the way and do the very few things I'm good at and delegate to others, I'm ready for that next level of growth. So if you're ready for that next level of growth, one way that I could help you is with Servosity. We co-manage your backups and disaster recovery so you can focus on what you do best, let us do the rest, and then what we do is we test the backups every single day so you never have to worry. If you'd like to learn more, click the link below. So you were saying that you enjoyed being the tech, and then at a certain point you decided to kind of put on the business hat and kind of really grow this. So it was a one-person shop at that time, I guess, right? Just you. Yep. And then tell me about how many folks you have today.
We're about 30 people now. Okay. Let's see.
What happened when you said, "I'm going to go grow this"? Because in my experience, especially when I'm a technical person and trying to put on the business and especially the sales hat, it's like, wow, this is harder than I thought.
Yeah. It was harder. It was harder to balance everything. It was hard to, learn how to interview people and evaluate people. That was probably the hardest part for me because I had not done that before. I was fortunate in that my husband, who helped do a lot of that in the beginning, he sort of taught me because he was a ex-HP person and he had hired a lot of people. So I said, "Hey, can you help out here? Because I don't really know what I'm doing." So he did, and he was great. And I just, I learned from what he did. Because I think interviewing, finding people, which is one of the most important things at an MSP or any services company, is really hard to do, and you got to do it really well. And we made mistakes. The first two people we hired didn't work. They worked for a while, but my husband actually had this really great attitude towards it. He said, "Just get the best out of them, that you can while they're working for you. But if they're not working, then have an exit idea." But don't, and his other thing was don't ever get rid of somebody unless you got the next person, which I would have done because there were times where I thought, I just can't, this is not working. But I was able to get good work out of the person, even though they didn't fit what was going on, but I would wait until I could find the next person, to pull them in. So I think that was good advice, actually, that I would give other people too, if you can. Sometimes it's not possible, but if you can. Those are the biggest things. I would say from a business perspective, though, I actually had some business background. Besides doing the technical work at HP, I also done some business management work. So I was very financially adept. So I had a really good sense of finances and kind of what should happen there. So that part was not too hard for me. I think the other part that was really hard was just the leadership part, being a leader. Like, what does that mean? What do you have to do? Do you do anything, or is it just this aura, that you give off? So that involved a
Yeah.
fair amount of things. And then I joined a business coaching program too, which helped me a lot. So those are
Okay.
all just different things I did to address the business part.
What do you attribute to the most MSPs don't make it to 30 employees?
Yeah.
So that's a huge, obviously not overnight, but still
Yeah.
huge between 1 and 30
Yeah.
employees.
Yeah.
What do you attribute to that growth?
Um, we grew organically. We did not grow. There were no, I mean, I would have been open to acquiring somebody smaller, but there just wasn't anything really that I ever found that was going to work. There was a lot of hard work. I think focusing on numbers and the business part of it was really important, and being willing to give up some of the operational part and find people who could manage the operational part, because we tend to do the thing that is most natural to us, that we're super good at. And as ex-technical people, we're great at operations. Like, that's all day
Right.
long we can do operations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So typically the thing that works first is the operations part. But
Yeah.
then the sales and marketing, and then, maybe HR or finance or these other areas are the things that are harder. So I tried to give up the operations as fast as I could. And I still didn't give it up fast enough, for sure. But I had good people who were working for me that were becoming leaders. And so I tried to give them ownership, give them metrics, KPIs, and then take my hands off of it and focus on the other things. So I think that was a big part of why it was successful and became successful. And we had really good people. I mean, I just have to say, some of these people that have been with me, they're on the leadership team. They've been with me 15, 18 years now.
Wow.
And they're just amazing people. They really are. I have to give them so much credit, for why we got to the point that we did. So I think those various things. There's some things they did wrong too, which we could totally talk about, which might be of more interest, I don't know, to people who are looking for mistakes to avoid.
Well, I'm trying to connect the dots. So you decided to start handing off operations to do more of what?
So I realized, well, there were a couple of things. Let me take you back to, when I peeled out and did the solo thing, I was really serving R&D groups, engineers. And I realized that I loved working with engineers. I love people who make things. I think it's fun, And they have a very, very particular tech stack that is not shared with the rest of the company. It has to do with, CAD software and product development, management software, and on the software side, all kinds of DevOps these days, DevOps software and et cetera and so on. So it's very specific to their domain and to their business unit, what they do, and the technology that supports that. Because at the end, all technology does is support people working. Like, otherwise, it has no point. So, although these days with AI, I think we're going to have to rephrase that a little bit. But anyway, but it does do that. That's really what it's supposed to do. So it's not just tech, it's process and people. And so the more you understand what a business unit, is doing and how they work, the better able you are to provide them with a technology infrastructure and support system that allows them to do great work, and be more efficient and productive and all that kind of stuff. So I stuck in that area. So I first, it was word of mouth growth, where somebody would leave the company, they'd go somewhere else. And at first, our niche, our focus was super small. It was R&D, but it was R&D in medical device companies, because that's the client I had, not because I had any particular, skill there. And so the thing that was different about that is that they have a lot of regulatory and compliance needs in the product development space. And so we got really good at that. So we got really good at engineering tech and really good at compliance, FDA type of compliance stuff. So then we grew organically that way for a while. And then that started to, as many MSPs, I think, find, that sort of slow down, or you could only go so far with that, right? And I wanted to grow more. And so I realized there were two things I realized at that point. First of all, I engaged a marketing firm to kind of help, because it wasn't my skill set. And I knew that I needed to spend some time and energy on sales and marketing. But at the time, I remember we were redesigning the website, and that was just sort of moment of realization, where I said, okay, well, am I going to make this sound like an IT services firm? I didn't even think MSP was really invented at that point. Am I going to make this sound like an IT services firm? Or am I going to make this sound like we do technology, IT, for engineers, for product development, right? And I was super torn. I mean, I still can remember sitting here with the marketing guy on the other end. And I just said, I don't know. Like, I'm afraid that if I just make it more engineering focused than on the website, then all these people will go, well, that's not for us. And there's a lot of business out there that I might be turning away or not doing. And I knew that technically we could do the business.
Yeah.
Because I will say, I mean, I'm just going to put it out there. Like, serving engineers is hard. Okay. They're really smart and they're really technical. So you cannot fake your way through that. You've got to have really good people, sharp people who really understand what they're doing, or they will just eat you for lunch. Really. It's not like you're dealing with, somebody else who doesn't understand tech, like they get it. So you have to really show your value and prove that to them. So I was worried that if I focused on that, I was going to be turning a lot of business away. But then I had this moment.
Everybody struggles with that, right? Everybody struggles with that. Like, am I going to pick this niche?
Yep. And is the niche going to work? I mean, I would go out on the web and I would do all this Googling, and I would think, there's nobody else out there that's doing just this niche, and I thought, that's either really great or really awful.
Yeah.
I'm not sure,
Right.
But in the end, I think honestly, mostly because I decided I wanted to do that work. I wanted to work with engineers. I wanted to work with that technology stack. That was what made me happy. It was what I thought was fun. And I thought, well, I think I have to go with that. I don't know if it's a great idea or not. I really wasn't sure. And, but that's what I did. And so at that point, I made a kind of a turning where I said, this is what we're going to do. We will still pick up, if it's a really product focused company and it's smaller, we'll pick up the what I call the traditional IT work along with the engineering work, just because it tends to be very engineering led, those companies. And so the other stuff just comes along for the ride, and we can certainly do it. But if it's more of a mid-market size company, they tend to have an IT, department already, and that's great. And our whole job is to work with the engineers and work with their IT department to make sure that, we're subscribing to their governance procedures, and we're making sure that the security that they have in place, that we're, following that. So it's very much of a art, to working with them. It is hard sometimes. They do tend to be pretty territorial, and they get worried, when somebody comes in. So we, I think we're pretty good at calming people down, and like, we're not here to displace you. We're here to do this thing over here, which you guys don't even want to do, and you can't do. So the engineers end up doing it. That's what happens. So our biggest competitors, either usually an internal IT department or the engineers that are trying to do it on the side to support their tech, but it's not a good idea. It does not work very well. So that's kind of that whole story.
Interesting. So I want to go back to that decision, right? I think anybody that's thinking about niching, we go through this. We tear ourselves down. We go, I'm going to turn down so much business.
Yeah.
There's so much fear.
Yes.
Take me through like your thought process at that time.
And I will just say, before I say this, as a side, every business coaching group we've ever been involved with has said, don't try to boil the ocean. If you go look at somebody like Seth Godin, who's this like marketing guru guy, first thing he says is, the long tail, right? Don't try to be something. You're too small. That's the issue. You're too small. Nobody's going to pay attention to you. But if you can make yourself really great at this smaller thing, get really great at that, and then you can grow from that. So back then, I was having people already say to me, no, make the choice, go for the smaller. And that's, I think, where the fear comes from, because you're saying, I'm going to box myself in to something that's too small. I won't be able to grow as much as I want. Or maybe I'm just not
Right.
even going to get enough business so I can't support myself or my company. That's the biggest fear. I mean, that's the biggest fear, that I'm going to have to lay somebody off, or I'm going to get smaller, or whatever, something like that, right?
Yeah.
And I think to me, I mean, you have to do what you feel really comfortable doing anyway. So this was a comfort zone for me, wouldn't be for somebody else. I mean, for somebody else, maybe, some aspect of traditional IT, maybe they love security. I mean, that's a big deal now these days, but trying to pick something smaller that might not be as obvious. I think there's part of what you love doing, but besides that, you have to just say, I'm going to make a bet on this. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to change,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm going to try to do it in such a way that I don't bet the farm.
Right.
Right. I'm going to make little bets. I'm going to plant little seeds and then make these smaller bets. And I'm going to see which one of those really pans out. Now, you can't make a bunch of different bets in different focus areas. That doesn't work, because then you look like you're all over the place. But you can do things quickly, like you can make a bet and you can do it for 3 to 6 months and say, hey, is this working? Am I getting what I need? And if you're not, then you just say, this isn't going to work. There's not enough business here. People don't care enough, or what have you. But that's kind of part of being in business, right? You never
Right.
know the answers. I mean, most of the time you're just experimenting as quickly as you can. I mean,
Right.
that's what I feel anyway. So yeah, there was a lot of fear. I was concerned. I was a sole breadwinner, had a family, had a mortgage, you know, so it wasn't insignificant. But I guess at the end of the day, I thought, well, if it doesn't work, I can always, work again and then start over, or maybe it's just not meant to be. I don't know. There's all kinds of things like that go on in your head. And then at some point you just say, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. And then you try it. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
I wish there
there
was
was
some really great algorithm I could give you, but I just don't think there is at all.
Do you think it was more that it was your comfort zone, or was it, I'm going to make this bet, and then at a certain point I'll know? I'll
I
be
think
able
it was
to
the
kind of
latter
understand.
more. I mean, I did like it. Don't get me wrong. That was important. But there was something just so compelling about, look at this group, this type of team in an organization. They don't have anyone who's really just supporting them. I'm here. The big companies had it. I mean, that was the other thing. I would go look at, I had friends that worked at Cisco, and they'd say, hey, how do you guys do at Cisco? They go, oh, they have a team. They have an engineering technical services team that just supports engineering. And they have dotted line or something to IT. And I thought, okay, well, if the big companies realized it, then it has to be something you could do with a smaller and mid-market company. So I did feel like it was a good bet to make. And I felt like if I could pull it off, then I would end up being kind of a leader in this area, because I was there in the beginning or the first or what have you. So I'm too small to say I'm a leader in it. That doesn't really, but in with the people and the groups and the teams that we do work with, when we show up and we say, we do technology for product development, software development, that's what we do. We're great at it because we are now, we weren't in the
Right.
beginning, but we're really, really good at it. And we understand the process, and we understand your business, and we understand what your KPIs are. We understand that time to market is, unless you're in a regulated industry, the most important thing that you need to do. So you need this, and you need this, and we know all of your tech. We know your tech. And that really is compelling to the people who are receiving that, because they know that that's true, right? And most of them these days are trying to work either self-serving a bit, or they try to get that service from IT. That's just too much for IT, unless it's a big, enormous company like Cisco, and they said, here's your team, we carved
Yeah.
off a team for you. But I think, to me, the fact that they carve off a team for them at Cisco is pretty significant. It means, yeah, we can't do it inside IT very well. So I think you see this too with sales. I've always thought that would be another really great area to kind of focus in, and marketing these days, I think for sure, because it's become so technical, that if you're somebody that understands that tech stack and you just focus in on the sales and marketing tech stack, I think that's pretty big too. I think those guys are in need of that sort of thing. There's probably MSPs that do that. I don't know. Do you know?
Yeah.
Are there?
I'm sure there are. I don't know if I know but it does strike me as a really good focus.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
How did you know that you had picked this and it was the right thing?
It started to grow, and it resonated with people. When I finally started real marketing, as opposed to the stuff I was doing at the time, you could see it resonating with people, the people that we were talking to. So I think the proof is, are you getting business, and is your messaging, working with people? That's how I think we knew. I think if it hadn't, then it would have been showing us that it wasn't important enough. It doesn't mean it's not a good idea when you decide to focus like that. It just may be there's not enough pain there, because it's really hard to sell if there's not some kind of suffering going on.
Right.
Honestly, like you're addressing a real pain point, because selling's really hard these days. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of competition. You want to pick something that's easier to sell, not something that's really, really hard to sell.
What was the pain you started to discover in the early days?
There's this very, there's a lot of friction, I would say, between IT and R&D, or IT and engineering in a company. A lot of friction. And I think it's, just really being impersonal about it. I think it's because, first of all, their technology is very specific in engineering. So you'd have to train up people to understand it, and that may be harder for a smaller IT group. I think also that they're both technical. And so there's some arrogance on both sides, and so they have conflict. But I think also because of that, when the engineering team was smaller, what they would do is they would try to serve their own tech, and they would really block IT out. Like, for sure, they would block them. They did not want them in there at all. And part of that's IT's fault. Honestly, they would not really understand what they were trying to accomplish. And IT would tend to say, well, we're here to make sure that there's safety, and that you don't do the wrong things, and that you don't take any risk, and that there's no security holes. Right. And engineering is going, yeah, we got to get product out the door. So that's all fine for you, but we have to get product out the door. So we have to break some stuff. You can't get product out the door without breaking some stuff. So honestly, that was sort of our opening. Well, we would show up and we would actually say to them, we're not IT. I mean, that sounds weird, but we would say, we are not IT. We are engineering technical services. We understand what you're doing, and we will make it good with IT, but we are serving you, and they pay our bill, not IT, not the CIO. The engineering group pays our bill. And they say, we love you guys because you make our life easier and you make our engineers more productive. And then they don't have to do all the stuff that before they were having to do that they got distracted with. And so that's, I think, why it worked, honestly. And we had some of our larger clients where we were working for one particular division, R&D, and they would go to these big corporate meetings, and the other division R&D heads would go, oh my gosh, we're struggling with this CAD thing, or we're struggling with this tech stack, or blah, blah, blah. And then they would turn to the guy who was, had hired us and said, what about you? And this was, I'm tooting our horn a little bit here, but he would say, oh no, we're good, because we have SPK. And they would say, what's that? And they would ask. And so it's because we just worked really, really hard to make sure that they were successful, that their business goals were met, whatever it was, time to market or compliance or whatever it was. That's what we focused on. We didn't focus on what technology was great or whatever. We just said, what are you trying to do? What's your big thing? What is your big goal this year? We have to get this product out the door by June. Great. We're going to help you get that product out the door by June. That's how we approached it. Not, we'll manage your CAD and we'll do all this stuff, right? I mean, that was what helped it, but it was by taking that kind of tactic with them, I think, and that approach that helped. Does that kind of answer the question? I don't know. I might have gone around in a circle there, but yeah.
When you were kind of validating this, when you said, this is what I think it is, How long did it take before you felt like you knew you were on the right track?
Oh, I mean, it took a few years. I won't lie. I mean, I knew, I mean, we were getting the business, right? So there was that, but I would second guess myself a lot. I mean, I would, especially when I saw when the whole MSP thing started to really kick into gear and all these people are doing,
Managed
MSP work, and
services
there's like,
everywhere.
oh, it's like popcorn, all this business, these opportunities. And I thought, wow, maybe I made a mistake, by focusing in on this. But again, I felt like, no, I like this,
Right.
this is
Right.
cool. It's fun. Maybe we're not going as fast as that guy over there, but that's okay. This is a great business, and I'm not just in business to make money. I'm in business to make money, of course, but that's not the only reason I did this. I did this because there were these other goals I had, and I wanted to create this culture, and I wanted to create a place where we were doing good work, and really
Yeah.
helping. So, yeah.
Knowing who you are is a huge part of it, I think. I think it is pretty funny, and I appreciate you sharing, though, because so many MSPs now are like, how do I figure out how to niche? How do I focus?
Yeah.
And even you, after you had focused, were kind of tempted, to think the grass was greener.
Yeah. Oh, I think we always do that, right? Well, now they want to focus because there's so much competition. And well, also the tech has changed, right?
Yeah.
So much. Yeah. I mean, I think that is really human nature where you think, I can't possibly be right. Those guys over there must have it right. I don't know if everybody does it or not, but I don't do that to a fault, but I definitely look around and I
Sure.
say, oh, okay. And that's good because you want to, shift and change what you're doing and tweak it, constantly. I think we have to constantly do that, especially in technology because things just change so fast, so
Right.
fast. Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to go back to what you said took years before you were certain. But if you were kind of to do that again or give others kind of advice, is there, looking back, was there data points where you said, this many months in, really, we were gaining business. I could have said, this is the right decision, or did you really have to wait for years before you could know?
I don't think I had to. I think I could have shortcut it, right? And it's a little bit about because there's the doing of the work, and you have to be able to do it well. But let's just assume whatever you decided to focus or niche in, you could do it really well. So just put that to the side, okay? Somebody once said that especially in service, until somebody becomes your customer or your client, the only thing they know about you is how good your marketing is. And I thought, okay, yeah, that's actually true. I think that if I had put more time and resources and effort into really honing the marketing and the messaging, in my case, to engineering, right? This is what we do. This is why we're so good at it. This is why you want to hire us. This is all of these things. If I had really spent some time and energy there, I think I could have known faster by the results of the marketing, honestly, whether that was resonating with people or not. And then, of course, the deals that you close from it. But we didn't have that kind of marketing machine when we did this. So it was much slower to see, well, okay, here's this referral, and okay, we got another referral, and this does seem to be working. And then the thing that we did know that really, this is actually important, is that when we got into these clients, it was hard to get in, but once we got in, we never left. Almost the only time we leave is if somebody gets acquired and there's a big shakeup or they go out of business, or they just flat out, something's wrong, they don't have money, and they have to start cutting stuff. But it's pretty rare. Most of the clients we've lost have been acquired by a large company, and the large company said, well, this is how we do stuff. So thanks, but no thanks. That's, I think, a big deal. That can tell you, if you have that stickiness, I think that tells you a lot. Then it's about, well, how do I translate that experience that people are having once I'm in to really great marketing and messaging so that people go, yeah, I want to buy that. Because it's getting those new clients that's so hard, right? That's really hard thing to do. So I say you can shortcut it, but you have to put money and resources into the marketing and sales. And then it takes a little bit of time still to let that float, but it would be less than, the 3 years or whatever it took to really start to understand that we were on the right track.
I want to dig deeper into how you differentiate today, right? So when obviously there's lots of MSPs, they already have an internal IT in most of your cases. So how do you differentiate, not just marketing, but how do you actually do things differently?
Okay. My answer is probably going to be a little bit more specific to engineering, because I'm going to talk about things that we can do that IT can't do.
Go for it.
I can do that, but that's not really going to help the people who are more on the IT MSP. But I think some of the things I'm going to say will apply. Okay. So the first thing we say to everybody is that, especially if you're an MSP if you're trying to just sell to the smaller SMB and they don't have any IT, then it's an easier sale, right? So it's like, you need somebody and we're it. I mean, it's not quite that easy, but to that extent. But if you're selling more into a mid-market type of a thing where there is already some technical presence inside, the first thing we always tell people is you have to be twice as good as whoever's working for them inside. Now, maybe it's not twice, but that's what we say. You got to be twice as good because you're more expensive. And you're not on their, we try to make ourselves as much part of their team as we can, but you're not in the company, right? So
you're also not the incumbent.
That's right. That's right. So you have to be twice as good, and you have to somehow show them that you're twice as good. Because you're going to be paying more money for you to do that work. And you have to show them that it is the value of what they're going to get exceeds the money they're going to pay, until they just say, well, I would never go back to the other. So that's one of the big things I think that one has to do. So if you're, in our case, it was like, we know engineering and we understand their metrics. We understand what they're trying to do. We would have SLAs also that were super aggressive because that's what engineering needed. So that was another way that we differentiated. And we still lose, deals where they say they perceive that their internal IT doesn't cost them anything because it doesn't cost their budget anything necessarily, right? So they go, well, it's free. And then we say, okay, well, if free works for you, that's great. But if at any point free does not work, which does happen, then we're here and come back and talk to us. And I would say half the time they'll come back eventually, right? So if I'm working more in the traditional, IT MSP kind of space, I have to find some sort of way that I'm providing value that is visible and felt and kind of tangible almost, that they are not getting from their internal IT department. And you got to figure out what that is. You got to ask questions. You have to maybe dig into your market niche and just say, well, what are they not doing? What is IT not doing for their client, their internal client, that I could do? And then I could go and I could say, hey, look, to the CIO or whoever, you're not getting this, but we can provide that. So here's why, and here's what the value is. I mean, that's what I would focus on. Yeah, it's a business decision. It's not a technology decision, right?
Yeah.
It's a business decision. And what you would do is you ask yourself as a business owner, would I buy this? Like if I were in that guy's place, would I spend the money on this? Is it worth it to me? And if the answer is I'm not sure, then you got to go back and rework it and keep reworking it until you come up with value. These days, even for us, we're trying to find ways when we go in to sell a solution, whether it's just a simple project like installing something, like upgrading something, let's just say, or if it's a managed services engagement that's going to go on for a year, we're trying to find ways to show them an ROI for that upfront before they buy.
Oh, wow.
Like, here, look, you're going to spend, $300,000 with us, but you're going to get $500,000 worth of stuff over the period of whatever, right? And here's how. You're not going to have to hire another engineer. We're going to save you. You guys are mismanaging all these engineering licenses over here. We're going to cut your bill there by 25%, like whatever it is, right? You show them that. If you can show it to them in a number, that's nirvana, right? That's
right.
like, oh, it's amazing. So we're trying to get better at doing that, for our audience. So things like that, I think, are very, very powerful. And I do think that, selling it, I think, is just getting harder and harder. I don't know how you feel. So we all have to find ways to show that value and prove the value. Because at the end of the day, if the value of what you get is more than what you're going to spend, it should be a no-brainer,
Right.
You should just say yes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So the typical MSP, IT MSP, right, we start in an area, right? We sell to everybody, and then maybe eventually we have a minimum seats or we do something, but we generally serve one geo. You decided to focus on engineers and in what geography?
Well, initially it was in the Bay Area because it was convenient.
Right.
But I very rapidly realized that geography wasn't going to work because there's not a business that way, right? So that's the other thing. If you niche in an industry or something like that, you're going to have to spread wider unless you just happen to be in a city where there's a ton of lawyers. Let's just say you do law firms or something, So we never really niched in the geo. We just immediately started. But we started here because it's easier to sell and talk to people locally and service people locally. We also had to quickly figure out, pre-COVID, we had to figure out how to remotely manage stuff. And so we did work that out pretty fast because we had to be able to do that. I've always thought the geography thing, I think that works really well for smaller companies, where the process and understanding the business may not be as big of a deal somehow, but the minute you get into a slightly larger company, you have to understand their business. I mean, I don't know how you're going to do it otherwise. And then if you're going to focus on that, then you probably have to get out of your geography a little.
Yeah, I love that. So tell me more about that and how focusing on engineering has allowed you to understand their business.
Yeah. So in this case, every business unit or team in a company has a different way of work. They have their goals, they have the way they work, they have their typical best practices and processes and what have you. And you have to start with that. So forget about the tech for a bit and just think, let's take something different. Let's take sales. Okay. So, and I'm not going to be as good at this because I don't know sales as well, but sales has a very specific set of metrics. They have things that they're trying to accomplish. They have their own applications that they use, right? They have a relationship with marketing. They have metrics that have to go back and forth between marketing and sales. They have ways that they hire people. They have ways that they onboard people. They have ways they try to make their salespeople, more productive. They have ways of automating processes. So the more you understand all of that, then you can actually bring some really valuable solutions to the table, because you understand the people and the process first and the goals. Then you can say, okay, here's this really good application, but Salesforce is not for everybody. You guys should not take Salesforce. Like, that does not make sense for you because here are the things you're trying to accomplish, and here's the size of your company, and here's how much that's going to cost versus something else like, just picking stuff, Zoho, So this is why we would recommend, and we do that a fair amount, and I think most MSPs do, you are recommending technology to them, whether it's an application or, cloud or hardware or something. So I think that's, that's the way to actually approach it. And then the next thing is that you're speaking to business people and you're speaking their language. You're not sitting there spouting off about networking switches, which they don't care about. What do they care about? I care that my people can get a connection to the outside world 99.9% of the time. Great. Okay, let's talk about that. What's happened? Have you had downtime? What happened with your people when you had that? You ask those questions so you really understand how they work. And then you can go to, here's a good solution for you. That's what I think, anyway.
Take me into your world. What is it like? What applications did you start to understand? What else did you start to understand? And even if we don't understand the words or the apps, I'm just curious, what did that look like in your world?
Yeah. The very beginning part of the world was this compliance world, right? Where oddly, time to market is not necessarily the most important thing, whereas it is to other R&D or engineering groups. But compliance is incredibly important. Like getting a warning letter from the FDA, like you do not want that, right? It's very expensive to get that. So the first thing we did was learn the entire, not the whole set of code that comes from, I won't use all of the acronyms and everything, but the stuff that comes from the FDA, but we would get a really good sense of what are design controls, what do they need to do in an engineering group, what kind of testing needs to happen, what kind of quality control is there that is required. Once we started to really understand that, then we could say, oh, we have some ideas for how you can use the technology you've got better. And in this particular case, they were using PTC. At the time, it was called Pro Engineer. It's now called Creo, which is a CAD tool, right? That part's not as important as the data management part of it in the back end, where you can do all kinds of things with that to enable engineers and make them work more seamlessly, where you can do things like, you guys should create a start part so that everybody's not creating things from scratch. And then there are certain standards on a start part. And then, here's this drawing format that is better than the one that you guys are using. Not because we're great mechanical engineers, but because we understand the process and we understand what other companies are doing. Try doing that also. Or those are just like really basic things, but also there are certain processes that they would use, to on the design part of the product or the part, and then they would go to kind of a layout 2D part. There would be certain, without getting into it, there'd be certain processes in there that we realized, we can automate those with the Windchill, which is the Pro Engineer or the Creo product development, product lifecycle management tool. So then we would start to implement things like that. We realized that there was a machine shop, that was taking these CAD. They'll take translation files from CAD, and they'll effectively run them into their like Mastercam or something like that, where they'll actually create the files that then drive and build the part, even if it's prototype on the machine. Well, there were all these disconnects between the product lifecycle management tool and the machine shop with their CAM tool, with their computer aided manufacturing tool. So then we would do a little networking that was involved there, and maybe even here's how we're going to transfer the files, and how we're going to make them more available to you, and here's also how those files that you get, they're not really in the right format. If they were in this format instead, they would be more valuable to you because then they would save your machinist's time, all that kind of stuff. Like that's how you got to get in the weeds, right? And figure out what's stopping people from being efficient. What are they sitting around doing manually? Which, by the way, you got to really dig for sometimes because a lot of people don't mind. Like even the machinists in particular, they're kind of like, no, we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
We don't mind sitting here and typing for 3 hours, but the manager doesn't want that, So those are the kinds of things that, just as one example, we would dive into. These days, when we're doing a lot of software companies and some SaaS companies, we're really part of the software development team, and we do a lot of DevOps work. And so they'll say, a really typical one with the smaller company, there were about 5 or 6 manual steps between testing and releasing to production, which was a cloud release. And we said, hey, let's build that into the pipeline. Let's automate all of that. Let's make it completely seamless so that in Jira, when you move this set of tickets over into this particular stage, it kicks off that process and everything just flows automatically, and it pushes the code to the server, to the cloud. So that would be a really typical, kind of thing that you would do on the software side. So those are just some examples.
I love this. I mean, even if you're not in I think it gets my mind spinning going, what else could I understand better? How did understanding just a nuance I think I picked up on, I know you said something like this earlier, but it feels like by understanding the applications, you make it about them and less about the infrastructure. Because I know you mentioned Jira, and I know you could self-host probably, but they could just have it cloud hosted. And then you're clearly not building the public cloud if you're talking about public cloud, but maybe you have a role to play in each of those instances.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
It sounds like you made it about the customer and the workflow and application, not about who owns the hardware and the switch.
So that is a huge point you just picked up on. It's enormous, seriously, because if you're really selling to the business and you're trying to make an impact, what are you trying to make an impact on? On their people and their productivity, right? That's where it starts. And how do people in their productivity, how are they able to do that more efficiently? Well, if they have good process and then they have an application that supports that process. So now you're at the application level, right? And the minute you hit that, if you can help them with that, because the application is technology, and sometimes it's easy to configure and sometimes it's not. These days, I think more often than not, it's not.
Right.
So if you can help them with that, then everything under that just flows down, right? So, hey, we're helping you with your product lifecycle management tool here. Do you want us to host it in the cloud for you? Oh, you do? Okay, great. Well, we'll take care of that. Don't worry about it. And then we'll take care of all of the stuff that needs to happen on the infrastructure side so that you don't even have to pay any attention to it, right? That's kind of the best possible scenario because now you're meeting a business need. And you're talking to them where their goals are, and the rest of it you just do. And even though that's really hard, and that's the part, right? That stuff's not easy to do. I mean, it takes a lot of operations. It takes a lot. So we tend to want to talk about it because it's really hard.
Yeah.
And so let's talk. Let me tell you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't care. You know, the guy is heading up product development. He does not care. You just want to make sure it works. It's like keeping the lights on. Just keep the lights on. And then if something goes out, then it's a problem, right? So it's one of those weird, to me, it's always felt like this weird thing where you don't make a big deal out of it, but it's a huge deal if it doesn't work. So you have to make sure it works and you're really good at it so that it isn't a huge deal, but you end up talking about everything up here because that's what they care about, which is the opposite of what a technical person wants to do. Really, we want to talk about this over here because it's fun to talk about,
Yeah.
But they don't care.
Right. Well, especially when you spend all the weeks, months, years becoming an expert in that.
Yeah. And maybe that's it, right? Is that we have to learn once we go on the business side of the MSP. And then when you're doing some delivery, when you're smaller, it's like you're schizoid or something, like you're flipping back and forth, between now I'm going to talk about, this incredibly technical thing. And then now I'm going to put a different hat on and I'm going to be with this guy over here where I can't talk about that at all or very little. It's hard. It's really hard. You have to have enough self-awareness, I think, to understand this is not about what I want to talk about. It's what's important to my listener, whoever that is. And it may be very, very different depending on the person. Because if I'm talking to somebody who works in IT and the system's down, we're going to have this conversation. But then if I go talk to the product manager, we're going to have very different conversations.
Yeah. I noticed you didn't say, I'm going to go in and resell XYZ cloud. I'm going to take it from on-prem to in the cloud. Or I know for a lot of MSPs that they don't want to put the infrastructure in the cloud. They don't want to do that.
Yep.
But tell me how you approach that.
Again, we approach it from the application. I have not, and maybe some other people have success doing this, because I'm not saying it can't be successful. We just have not had success showing up and saying, hey, we'll put your thing in the cloud, or we'll put your thing in the cloud. We'll create this infrastructure for you in the cloud, and then you can migrate whatever workloads you want or whatever over there, right? So what we have had success with doing, though, is saying, here's this application Codebeamer, which is like a requirements management, test management tool that PTC owns. And we say, we've been helping you with it, and you guys want to expand your groups, or you want to include other people in it, or you have these new workflows that you want to do it. Like, we can do all of that for you. Great. So it would probably be better if we hosted this for you in the cloud, because it's just going to be more efficient. We're going to have control over it. Let's go talk to IT about that. And then you have this big thing, IT is like, no, you can't. And you say, well, this is why it's such a great idea. And then they say yes. Right? So then now you have a hosting and a cloud infrastructure part of your engagement, but it was a little bit of an afterthought almost. It was
Mm-hmm.
more like, this is what you need to make this whole thing successful. So that's how we've approached it. We have a pretty decent hosting business, but it's based on the applications that we know and understand,
Mm-hmm.
not anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, in other words, if I understand you, it's not that we have competency in Azure or GCP or AWS
Yeah.
as much as we are experts in SolidWorks or whatever, and we can make that run the best way.
That's right.
And, we'll, more importantly, we'll achieve this outcome. Like you don't,
Exactly.
I don't know that you really care where it is as long as we improve the outcome.
Exactly. That's exactly it right there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
maybe there are people who have success showing up and saying, well, put your workflows in the cloud. There must be some. We just haven't been able to do that. I think that works if they're kind of bespoke applications, maybe legacy things that a company has developed, stuff like that, right? And then you can show up and say, we'll help you migrate all that stuff to the cloud, because those are very bespoke, right?
Right.
But if you show up and say, hey, and actually SolidWorks PDM was a perfect example of this, because it is not an application written for cloud. And Dassault has their own newer, platform that they sell, but there's a lot of people out there that want SolidWorks PDM. So they say, we want SolidWorks PDM. And by the way, we want it to work just like on-prem. And, if anyone who's done anything with databases, especially applications that are client server that are not written for the cloud, there's all kinds of weird stuff that goes on. So it took us about a year and one client to just work all this stuff out. And then we finally kind of worked it out. And we actually offer we created it's an AWS kind of workstation virtual client thing that we call VCAD, because what we had discovered too is that, putting the client right next to the server out in the cloud was going to get you the best bet, right?
Yeah.
And so we actually wrote a little product ourselves that's called VCAD to do that. And then we were able to then rinse and repeat once we got that all worked out. But it took a while to work it out. But that's the other thing, right? Is when you do that with an application, you got to understand the application to make it work in the cloud. I don't know how you would do it otherwise, because you're going to end up, you can't just lift and shift all this stuff over and just expect it to work.
Yeah.
Because it usually doesn't. So.
What I love about this is first of all, that you're focusing on the outcomes and creating differentiation because of that. And then it seems almost as secondary, but you're creating intellectual property. By what you just said, that's some form of intellectual property, which is not the norm for the typical MSP that I think we need to rethink. If I buy the same RMM and sell to everybody in the area, just like everybody else in my space, buying the same tools, how am I really going to differentiate? Am I really going to create a moat in the intellectual property?
Right.
Any of those.
And on that topic, that's really interesting, because you can differentiate in a lot of ways, right? You can differentiate by saying, I really understand this industry, or here's this kind of slightly oddball technology that I know really well. Sometimes even it's older stuff that people still want to keep using, and you say, okay, well, I'll keep it working for you, or I can do that. Or you might differentiate by really, understanding particular workflows even within a company, right? That gets a little bit to the team side of things, but still that. But any along the way, if you're just buying and reselling stuff, you got to really watch yourself, truly, because what's to stop anybody from showing up and saying, I can buy and resell stuff? And even us, we do partner with these engineering companies, like we're an Atlassian partner, and we're a PTC partner, and all of that is fine. And it's nice to earn a little bit of money when you resell something, but that is not the point of what we're doing ever. It's just a nice way to have a little extra margin, because margins, especially if you're doing projects, they go up and down a lot, right? So it helps smooth them out a little bit. But and we have found that to get attention from brand new people who don't know who we are, if you piggyback off of one of these brands like a SolidWorks or whatever, it is easier, But the minute you get it, that you got to immediately move off of that. Like, okay, great, you got your license, whatever, right? Here's how we're really going to help you. Here's how we're going to make that work for you better. Here's how you're going to save money. Here's how you're going to be more productive. And then in the end, that was just the way you got in the door. That was it. And then everything after that is your service and how you differentiate.
Yeah. Yeah. And at least you're starting from knowing what PTC or SolidWorks is versus a lot of times. I remember being in an MSP a long time ago, I would get called in because I was the generalist and they were like, make whatever work. And I was like, I've never seen whatever. Sure. I mean, it was fun technically to like roll up my sleeves and try to figure a new thing out. Yeah. But that's not the same as competence or experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And we all run into that, right? We'll even in engineering, even they'll say, here's this application, but we'll just tell them, yeah, we've never heard of it. We don't know anything about it, but we can figure it out. But just to let you know, it's going to take us this long. Yeah. And usually when they do that, nobody else knows it either. So it's not like I can pick up the phone and call somebody else and say, hey, get in here and, address XYZ app. So we do always find ourselves in that position, but we try to find ourselves in that position less rather than more, And that's the other thing about the niching or focusing is that you do your technical people a favor too, right? Because you're not just saying we can do it all. You're saying, here's the subset of what we really work on. You guys get really good at this and get really excellent at it so that you can be twice as good, right, as whoever's inside, or twice as good as even most of the professional services organizations of those software companies, because you're also competing against them, right, sometimes. So yeah, it's hard. But it's fun, it's fun, but it's hard.
Speaking of the team, how does this being so focused on the niche affect your hiring? Obviously super competitive in Silicon Valley, affect your culture and your team?
I think that for technical people who like challenge, it's fun because the engineering technology stack is a lot of fun to work on. So I think that helps. I think that we do not try to attract the same engineer that wants to work at Meta or Google at all. You're a cog in a wheel, you're a number. And there's some people who like that, but they're not going to be successful at my company, So the people who are successful at SBK are people who like to solve problems, have an entrepreneurial spirit, that like a collaborative, team-oriented atmosphere where you really are needed. Like if you don't show up, we really miss you. We needed you today. And there's a lot of people that want that kind of environment. So we try to find those people and we try to talk about that in our advertising. And we also, for the position, but we also talk about it initially. We say, are you this kind of person? Here's the profile of the kind of person that does really well with us. And if you're not, it's fine. But you shouldn't continue on, because you will be miserable here. And we do have made mistakes, of course. The other thing we try to do these days, which I was not good at, years ago, is we have like a 30, 60, 90-day onboarding. And we have very specific things that a person has to meet. Because if they're not meeting those things, they're probably not going to work out very well. And the longer you keep somebody, the more expensive it is. And it's bad for them, too. You're a lot better off just saying at 60 days, hey, no harm, no foul. This is just not working. You're not a good fit for here, but you're going to be a great fit somewhere else. This is just not your place. That works better than a year and a half later doing it. So we try to do that. And, we can't pay what Meta pays, but we do have to pay very fairly. And we watch the market all the time. Like we're constantly looking at different surveys or what the people are making, because around here that's pretty important. It is harder for us to hire here these days. It's very expensive to live here, and I think it's hard. Like more senior people, it's fine, but very junior people out of college, it's pretty rough. So, with some, we have to adjust sometimes what we're doing. We try to also have almost like a ratio of how many senior people do we want, mid-range, and then junior, because we can only really do so many junior people at a time fairly to really train them and give them the time, that they need to be successful. So those are a bunch of things we think about.
Now your clients are all over. What about your team? Are they all in the Valley? Do they come into an office? Are they spread out? What does that look like?
We're spread out now. We have core leadership that is in the Valley, and they come into the office. We do twice a week. I think 3 would be ideal, but we've just sort of settled on twice. I think that's a really nice balance, so you can get focused work done at home. You don't have to commute those days, but then on the days that people are in, there's a ton of collaboration and there's a really great synergy. So that's really helpful. Mm-hmm. The rest of the people are, we have a few in North Carolina. We have one in Texas. We have a couple up in Canada too. And then we've got 1 or 2 people down in Colombia. So we're around. Just a little bit of nearshore there, right?
Yeah.
The people who and this is every company I think has to really figure this out. What do you need near you? Like, who do you need close in? Like, who makes you really successful at your client? And in our case, it's something we call a client program manager, which is a person who's very technical, who has architecture skills too, and who has relationship building skills. And they're just like a key to success at the client. Those people, we will never put them in other countries. We would never hire them anywhere else except here. And they don't have to be in the Bay Area. Matter of fact, sometimes it's better if they're not, but we bring them in a lot. So we'll fly them to the office. We have like a whole cadence as to how often people should come in, be here face to face, because for me anyway, I just have found that if you don't have that enough, you really lose something. I know there's a lot of discussion about this. A lot of people have different opinions. For me and for our company, having people have a certain amount of face-to-face time has been really critical. And we did okay during COVID, but it was times it was really hard. It was hard to not see anybody, to never be able to talk to them face-to-face.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Let me hit you with another controversial one, Chris. What is your take on pay based on location? If I live in the Valley and then I move to North Carolina,
yep.
Right, do I get the same comp because the cost of living is nowhere near as high?
No, you don't. Not in our company, and we tell you that up front. And we've had people move from the Bay Area to North Carolina, and we have adjusted their pay. But we're clear about why. We're very transparent, so we share financials in the company, like top to bottom, with the whole company.
What does that mean, top to bottom? Right?
It means we share not just like here's our revenue or here's our sales, but here's the revenue, here's the gross margin, here's the EBITDA or operating profit, whatever you want to call it. Here's how many people we had. Here's some other metrics. We don't share pay because that is very easy to misinterpret. And it's too difficult. It's just too hard. I know there's some people who do that or companies that do that. I just find it to be too hard because people misread things all the time. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to sit there and have endless conversations with people about whatever. We work really hard to make the pay fair, like so hard. So that's got to just be good enough, right? But if you're going to move to North Carolina from San Francisco, you are not going to make as much money because the cost of living is completely different. And we'll show you the pay grade. Here's this thing from our survey. Here's what your title makes in North Carolina, and here's what I made in San Francisco, So if they're not that far up the pay scale, we may just kind of cap their pay and wait until, the years catch up a little bit. But I think in one case, there was a significant enough difference that we said, hey, if you want to do that, that's okay with us, but here's what's going to happen. And he was fine with it. He understood. I think people understand, And I think because that's why I talked about sharing the numbers, because it's not this just sort of ethereal, the manager said so or leadership said so. Like I'll pull out a P&L and I'll say, look, I can't, here's why that makes sense. And here's why if you go there, this is what here's the impact it's going to have on the company, et cetera. Like I'll show it to them. And I found almost everybody appreciates it. They may not like it all the time, but they understand that we're trying to do something fairly. I think that's meaningful.
So I want to just hit the point just to make sure I got this right. What is your, I guess, how much is what people would call co-managed? And I'm not sure you can call it that, but you work for these larger companies, so maybe you could call that co-managed versus the kind of fully managed.
Yeah. Nothing. Oh, with one exception, there's one small company that we work with, which is like a SaaS startup, where we're part of their team. We do all their DevOps, but we also do the rest of their IT, what there is of it, not that much. Yeah. And they're mostly engineers. That's the other thing. They're mostly engineers that are in the company, so they don't need a lot of help with anything. Other than that one company, everything is co-managed, everything. Because, and that goes back to the niche, right? So a small company with 3 engineers does not need us, right? But a company with 50 engineers, where they're trying to really operationalize engineering, they really need us, So the minute you get into that, you've got an IT group in there somewhere. So we have worked out how to do that with IT. Again, if we're just really focused on engineering, a lot of times IT is kind of glad because those guys are a pain to them, because they don't really understand what they need or they're not good at it. So that works out okay. But there's a lot there. There's diplomacy and relationship skills.
I bet.
And some psychology that is required.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, how would you describe, because when I think of niche, I think picking a vertical, healthcare, finance. But your customers are all across all kinds of verticals. So it's not a geography niche. It's not a vertical niche. How would you describe your niche?
Yeah, that's a great question. I used to think about that. Like, what am I niching in anyway? I always called it, I was niching in a organizational team niche, like a business unit niche was what I was niching in. Now, people who do product and software development tend to be mostly in a manufacturing space, but then there's a lot of subsectors to that. And remember, I mentioned the whole regulatory compliance capability that we had. So we have med device, we have, I wouldn't call the major automotive, but what I'd call the automotive, like second or third tier, the set of vendors that serves major automotive, those can also very much be our clientele. And we've had some aerospace as well, people who, develop any kind of flying aircraft. All of those are very safety oriented clients and industries in manufacturing. So that's definitely something that we go in. But again, because it's really product and software development, we found ourselves in financial services because those guys are turning into software companies, right? Because it's all about their apps and things. So we find ourselves in there quite a bit too. So that's what it sounds weird when you first say it, but then it's almost like a horizontal niche, like here's where we live. We understand this business unit and everything that they do. And it's in mostly manufacturing, a little bit in financial. That's where mostly it lives.
I love that. Business unit niche. That's a new one. I want to switch gears for a second. What's the biggest lesson you've learned over all the years in business?
That's really hard because there have been a lot of lessons. I would say the biggest thing is just not to be as afraid of the things that happen, honestly. There's a lot of fear involved when you have your own company. And I think it's important for people to know that that's okay. Everybody's afraid, You're afraid because you love the thing you're doing and you're afraid it's not going to work and that you're going to have to go back to work, or something.
Right.
I think though, what I've seen, the thing I've learned the most over the years is that there are crises and they always happen and they happen, and you find your way through them. I mean, if you're thinking about it and you've got the right motives, and you've got, decent people who work for you, and you've got just a decent business idea, right, of what you're working on, you'll find your way through it. You may get smaller for a while. I mean, you may have to pull the belt in, but you'll find your way through it. So I wish I had that kind of confidence a little earlier. I might have done some things differently. Maybe would have taken some more risks, But anyway, that was what I would say.
That's a really good one. I can really say that. I think everybody probably can relate to fear.
Yeah, for sure.
If there's one thing you could do over or differently, what would that be?
Again, it's related to the risk thing, I think, a little bit. So I made a big hire, which means that somebody with seniority, and it was more expensive. So it was an investment, right? I hired a VP of sales and marketing. I should have done it earlier. I felt like, and this goes back to, I think there's a lot of things that MSP we tend to come out of the technical space. There's some out there that don't, but we tend to come out of the technical space. So again, we're really great at operations, and we try to just feel our way through sales and marketing somehow. And we read a lot and we watch podcasts, and we're like, okay, we can do this.
Right.
It's an art and a skill. And, I got better at it, but I was never as good. Nowhere near as good as the guy who was my VP of marketing and sales. And I should have done it earlier. Yeah. Should have just said, nope, I'm going to spend the money. I'm going to make that commitment. Again, just sort of incur that risk. Yeah. That would be the thing I would say. Interesting.
What's the biggest thing you're looking forward to now? All the changes going on, the size of your business, the industry, all kinds of things going on. What are you looking forward to?
What I'm really looking forward to is empowering my leadership team to take on more and more and more, which I've done a lot the last year and a half, so that I can really step back and just enable them, and watch. It's almost like you build the business, but then you kind of want to see the business be able to run itself, so to speak, without you. So it doesn't need you anymore. That's what I'm working on. And it's kind of fun. I mean, it's not always fun to not feel needed at times. We're like, oh, they're good without me. But maybe as a woman, it's a little easier. I don't know. I'm just kind of like, okay, that's good. Yay. Good for them. Yeah. Because it's almost like watching people grow, and grow into being able to do something is so wonderful. It's so wonderful to see that. So that's what I'm working on.
Yeah. I find that the best part of all the hard work of starting a business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is to watch people grow.
And they're so excited, because they're empowered and they have more authority and ownership over stuff. It's amazing what happens with people when you give them real ownership over something,
Right. Right.
Not just here, do these 10 tasks, but you decide. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot more engagement.
Yeah.
What's your biggest challenge right now?
I'd say continued. I still feel like we have a lot more leads than we ever did, because of all the work we did. But we still don't have quite enough for the growth trajectory that I think I've got on my mind. But I think we'll get there, but we're still working on that. We don't have it completely solved. So that's probably our biggest challenge at the moment. But once we get that solved, then our biggest challenge will be getting people, right? So it just whatever it is, it flips over to something else, and then you go work on that. So
the other funnel in the business, right?
Yeah.
Talent.
Yeah. Talent. Yeah. That's a tough one, but also fun to work on.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Is there a book you would recommend? What's the number one or two books you would recommend?
Oh, okay. Let's see. I'll stick to business since that's probably what people want to hear about. I love reading biographies and things like that. So I do a lot of that kind of reading as well. I'm fascinated by people, and how they maneuvered through whatever their particular set of circumstances was. But somebody gave me this business book, which I think is pretty famous, called 10X is Easier Than 2X. It involves Dan Sullivan. Yeah. And I found that to be interesting. At first I looked at it, I was kind of like, that sounds so whatever. But
cliche or something. Yeah.
yeah, but there were actually some really good things in there. There were a lot of, it wasn't just about money. It wasn't just 10x your money. It was
Right.
about 10xing time, value, enjoyment. Like there's a lot of stuff in there. And I really loved, it did resonate because I thought it's true. Like sometimes you try to incrementally go your way through something and it's really, really hard. But if you're willing to take that jump. So that was one. The other one is I really like Cal Newport, who was the guy that wrote Deep Work and all of that. And I do follow a lot of his writings. And he just wrote, his most recent book is called Slow Productivity. And I really like it. And it's an interesting thing to read and try to implement in your company when you see what he talks about, because you think, oh, I have a services company. This is impossible. I can't possibly, his last book was A World Without Email. And you're thinking, yeah, right.
Right.
But if you read the books and really try to at least take the spirit of what he's saying and apply it to your circumstance, it's very, very valuable. And we've done a lot of that in the company. And I think it's really, it helps, a lot with the culture and the support system, because people realize that, sitting watching email and like a queue coming in is the worst possible thing you can do. So we said, no, we're going to have people who are queue runners, and they're going to only involve you when you need to. And then we're going to have focus time, and people are going to have focus time, and they're going to turn everything off. And they're like, so these are just some of his ideas. And I found them to be really helpful. So that's another book I like this year.
I love that. I've been working a lot of focus time and deep work myself. Cal Newport's amazing. 10X is easy, 2X is wonderful. I sent that book to dozens of people last year.
Did you? Very cool.
Favorite book. Yeah.
Very cool. I was going to say, don't you love how Google Calendar implemented Cal Newport's thing, and they have, you can do a focus time now, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at that.
Yes.
That's kind of cool.
It's really cool, and it makes it into the mainstream.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, for those that would love to reach out to you, connect with you, find you, how should they do that?
Probably LinkedIn is the best. Okay. And just mention that you can also email me, but I think, email's a little harder to manage sometimes. So LinkedIn, and just mention that you were listening to the podcast, because I do get a lot of connection requests, and some of them they just want to sell me something. So I don't always accept them. But if you say that, I would definitely accept it and would look forward to any conversation people want to have.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Make sure to take Chris up on that opportunity. Chris, this has been amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for the gift of your time and energy. And thank you so much for being on MSP Mindset.
Yes. Thank you for asking me. It's been a delight, honestly. Thanks, Damien.